The album itself is a whole process through healing, I think. Listening to it lyrically, you've left nothing off the table, and I commend you for that. Because as a writer and a performer and an artist, you know, you captivate your audience. A lot of people perform for their audience. You definitely have an audience that is drawn into you as a human being, and I can imagine at times that's meant that you felt like you needed to protect yourself, even from the people who love you the most. But you've really dropped the guard on this one, and you've let yourself completely wide open in a vulnerable way. I feel we have to just sort of touch on some of the subject matter and lyrics on this album, but I sort of want you to pick it up. I don't want to ask a question. I want to follow you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, the album is obviously as good of a picture of heartbreak as I could do. And
as you could hear.
Think, ooh, yeah. And also I realized as I was kind of untangling a lot of knots in myself, that there are just so many ways that I learned how to love that were not right, and unlearning something that you're 31 years in on is really tough. And so some of the stuff that I talk about on Petals for Armor, it's like I'm still in those processes. And honestly, if we had toured Petals for Armor, I probably wouldn't have gotten to get to the underbelly. Like, I probably thought I was there, and I wasn't even close.
You were ready for more distraction, right? You were ready for more like applause and more lights and more like, cool, this is really great. Yeah, because being out there and being so busy all the time and having people, you know, even though there are times that you feel naked because there's a lot of eyes on you, it's the most insulated that I ever feel is being on tour. Insulation of touring and the desire to go out potentially and distract yourself without even realizing that's what you're doing, but you can't, so you have to stay still again.
Yes, and also very quiet, because, you know, even going to the grocery store felt like an offense, and also like terrifying for a while. I think so. One of my favorite songs on the record is called Inordinary. And the reason that I have such a reaction to it is that I think I started talking about something small and like an incident in my life. And then it kind of blooms into, you know, it goes from like wanting to belong to someone, and then belonging to a lot of people, and then belonging with somebody. And then realizing, oh man, I can barely remember what it feels like to just belong to myself. And I got to kind of experience a long period of time in this, however many minutes this song is. And I'm really, really proud of that. I always reference back to my 7th grade year when Mom and I moved to Nashville. We kind of, we did run away, like, quite literally. And we came here to seek refuge. And we also had some family friends in town. And that's kind of how we got on our feet here. But that's when everything in my life opened up. That's when I met the guys. That's when music became within reach for me. Like, right, I learned to play the guitar, and, you know, I'm really proud of this album because it's as much of a songwriter's album as I've ever made.
You talk about this person who at times has a very timid nature when it comes to actually expressing yourself, especially in light of other people's ability. And yet you find this courage and confidence to go out on stage. And I've seen Paramore, man. I mean, when you come out, it's just like this bolt of lightning. And I wonder what it takes out of you, or how you prepare yourself to actually be that person who makes sure everyone has a good time and gets the Paramore experience. How do you sort of put on the costume, the superhero armor, to be able to go out there and be that person, and then know that it's not necessarily like, there are show-offs, man. There are people who go on stage who are literally like, I'm born to do it, you know, and they'll be like that off stage. Yeah. Whereas you are a contradiction in that regard, I feel.
And that's like an uncomfortable thing about me, that I feel like I can feel the push and pull of it oftentimes when I have to go between something that I'm doing that might be very public facing and then my life at home with my family or my friends. I do think that there is something incredible about the energy that being in solidarity with your friends on a stage and playing a show, that brings me a lot of strength that I don't credit to myself maybe as much as I should, because I do know that it's in me all the time. But I guess I just don't tap into it. I heard Dolly Parton say this really incredible quote recently about, I think she was talking more about business, but it kind of applies here. She was talking about how she tries to strengthen the muscles around her heart, but her heart can't get hard. It has to stay soft and it has to stay really open, which means you feel hard and you hurt, but you gotta like, I'm in it right now. I'm just trying to figure out ways to strengthen myself despite the things I've been through, despite like everything I wrote about with Petals for Armor and things that I wrote about on this record. Like, I am a very strong, resilient person. But it just comes with the territory, I guess, for me, that when a feeling comes, when it happens, it's possible that it can take me out if I don't understand how to harness it.
I never knew you and your mum ran to Nashville. I mean, there's been hints of the stories. I don't realize that it was literally pack your bags, we're out of here.
Oh yeah.
I wonder kind of how much that is reflected in your career choice. Let me qualify that statement. You go searching for a new family and you find a way to run every day.
Yeah. I'm addicted to the feeling. That's something I work on, we
got to get out of here. We're done.
Yeah.
Like, this show's over. Next stop.
Yeah. And you'd be hard pressed to find someone better prepared or proactive in times of crisis. Like, when the shit hits the fan, find me, because I will figure out we will not leave a trace. You know what I mean? And I think it's because of that I don't even think it's all because of things I actually went through physically with my mom, but I think that it's almost like my mom and I have been talking a lot about the concepts of generational trauma and generational prayer. And I think generational traumas come up a lot because of what we've talked about over the past year. Finally, more and more people are willing to talk about systemic racism, right? And what this has done to a lineage of folks. But for me, even just within my own family story, the women went through a lot of shit way before I was an idea, and certainly before I was born. And, I think I just picked up on that at a young age. And we actually ran to Nashville 2 times. And the first time we kind of got found, and you would think like, oh, you shouldn't go back to the same place. But for whatever reason, Nashville was the spot. Like, my mom, both of us, I loved music. I really wanted to be here. And I don't know. I think my mom is a super brave and super resilient person. And I'm grateful to have that North Star sometimes, because when I don't feel resilient, I can kind of look at what she's been through and be like, that's in me,
The early impressions of Paramore when you first came out was that, and we spoke about this a little bit, but not in relation to this conversation, was that, you were born to do it, and that was recognized within someone, potentially your mom or someone else, and everything was built around this ambition this desire that you had to be a musician and a performer, and that it was all just kind of like all roads lead to Heyli. That was kind of the way Paramore was positioned amongst, I would say, probably either the insiders or at worst the cynics. And I wonder, when you think back to that moment you just talked about, I wanted to be a musician, my mom chose Nashville, all the pictures and the pieces come together in that moment, whether or not there was less cynical but more purist, this kind of manifestation of a new destiny based around your passion.
Oh yes, man. Yes. I don't think of the move to Nashville so much about my career, in context of my career, as much as I do in context of survival. Like, it gave my mom and I a chance to live in a more peaceful home. And, the rest of my family, my dad's side of the family, eventually came up to Nashville. And, my mom and my dad had been divorced for a long time at that point, and they were friends. So it Yeah, it was a beautiful, magical time, that time, and that's why I bring it up in that song, Inordinary, because I feel like I really became a person then. And it felt like the ideas, the wild dreams that I had as a kid weren't that crazy anymore.
It sounds like the last 12 months, there's been complications, as you said, on a global level, but you've had to navigate and you've had to charter a path through this. You did so through music. I feel compelled, based on the quality of the songwriting and the amazing ability to be able to capture heartache on this album. It feels very, very fresh. It feels very real. I'm not sure I've ever truly gotten the right answer, or never really asked this question before, which is, what does it feel like when you are experiencing it in a very, very real, very fresh way, but you are actually navigating your way through it creatively, as opposed to stewing in it, which most of us do because we don't have the option to write. And even people who do often choose not to until they have some clarity of thought. I don't feel like there's a lot of clarity of thought here, except everything that you're experiencing in the moment.
Yeah, I'm normally that type of artist that you're talking about. I'm normally one who likes to have hindsight kind of information, to build a song with.
Well, that's where your imagination lives, Yeah. That's when you can incorporate a little bit of like, the facts are the facts, depending on which way you look at it. Yeah. But I don't get a lot of that here. It's so raw.
Oh man. Well, yeah, it's hard for me to listen to, which I told you, it's not a record I'm going to like pop on and be like, this feels
what
great.
A shame.
I just, I lived it. And also at the same time, it's like, it is so raw and so of the moment, but it also is such a culmination of all the lessons I've learned throughout, like, multiple relationships that just were, what's the word? That just felt like my own body was like eating itself. I just haven't had a great relationship with a good enough relationship with myself to receive pure and simple stuff, like romantic relationships, and I've been in therapy now since we got home from After Laughter, and I still go every week. I'm very fortunate that I can do that. But writing all of this stuff was kind of I didn't know I was writing songs. I know that probably seems hard to believe, but a lot of them before we got into the studio were just half songs, like things that, I would just turn on my voice memo on my phone and like barely mumble through some stuff. And then I was able to sort of make sure that I was crafting it right once we were in the studio. But it felt, it's really hard to answer your question, because the days you wake up when you are feeling anything akin to heartbreak or grief, it doesn't feel, nothing feels real. Nothing feels real or right. And you question every move that you make. You question if you're doing something in vain. You question all your motives. And you also just kind of question the point of anything. And so I think everyone was kind of feeling that way as it was, just being the year that we all had. And I think knowing that was actually helpful. It was helpful to know, like, I can't be the only person feeling a bad feeling or something, being struck with grief.